So the third and final conflict of interest category, everyone's favorite, it's gifts. It can be a little confusing at times under the ethics law, but a lot of it is also about common sense.
At a basic level, you shouldn't ask for or accept gifts that present an actual conflict or an appearance of conflict. Something that could be seen as trying to sway your duty as a city employee to someone else's gain. So the code has a very broad definition of gifts. It's the transfer of any good or service without adequately paying for it. And basically, to put it in a nutshell, tangible things like jewelry, tickets, or equipment to services that you don't pay for. And the law defines a significant gift as a gift over $20. There are categories of people who you can't ask
for or receive gifts from. And as shorthand, we'll just call those controlled donors.
So first is from anyone who does or seeks to do business of any kind with your agency. You can't ask for or accept goods or services or gifts from that person. Goods or services, as long as they're paid for, sure. Fair market value, sure. But you can't accept anything less than that.
And similarly, this is just one step removed from the first one, somebody who wants to do business with someone who already does business with the city. So that would be sort of a subcontractor scenario. Here, it's not just the person who holds the contract or does business with your agency who you can't accept a gift from. It would be the person who also does business with that person. So a subcontractor to a contractor, for instance. Individuals who might be engaging in activity that's regulated by your agency. You wouldn't want it to look like they're giving you a gift to get favorable treatment, for instance.
Lobbyists, this is a little common sense too. If someone's been a lobbyist in the last 12 months concerning matters within your jurisdiction, don't accept a gift from them either. And potentially even after somebody has been a lobbyist and this time, the 12-month time period runs, again, you can still think through whether there's an appearance of accepting a gift from that person. Number 5 is sort of another broad one. If the gift giver or the person you're asking for a gift has a financial interest that might be affected by your duties or materially affected by your role in some way in a manner distinguishable from the general public, you shouldn't accept a gift from them.
And I should say that whenever there is a business, a formal business itself that holds the contract or that could be impacted, that all these categories include an individual officer or an employee of that organization as well. So it's not just the business in the abstract, it's also the people who work for and govern that business.
Say LLC owns property that's slated for commercial development. You wouldn't be able to accept a gift from that LLC, but the law also says you shouldn't accept a gift from anybody who's an owner, partner, or officer in that organization. So really, it's not just the business you can't accept gifts from, it's people associated with those businesses as well.
The same would go for nonprofits, houses of worship, etc. If you're regulating or doing business, or your agency is somehow involved in work that impacts those organizations, that's when you need to sort of put the brakes on and think about, okay, should I be accepting that from these people? Should I actually be asking for donations from these individuals? And in fact, on our website, we've put together a gifts quiz to sort of walk you through these steps to determine if it's something you can accept. And again, we are always happy to help you think through that. There are some exceptions to when you could ask for donations or gifts from the people that we just talked about.
You can solicit for an official government program or city-sponsored charitable function if it's allowed by a rule or regulation of the ethics board or has been approved in advance by the ethics board. And this is where charitable and governmental gift solicitation waivers come in.
The ethics board has a process called a charitable and governmental gift solicitation process that allows for agencies or employees within the agencies to say, look, I think that there's something that we would like to fund as an agency, and we'd like to be able to ask for private donations to also fund that program. What the waiver process does is you can come and ask the ethics board for the waiver, and there's an application process, which you can find on the website. In that scenario, the ethics board looks at the purpose that you want to fundraise for, and they look at measures that you'll take to make sure that you're not just targeting or directly targeting one of those controlled donors, and then they'd be in a position to say, okay, we allow you to raise funds for this specific endeavor, in a broad way. The broad request to raise funds might go to a controlled donor, but as long as it's not directly going to that controlled donor, the board could allow you to do that. And then there are some obligations that come along with that. You have to account for all the donations you get, and you have to file reports that detail what you've done with those donations.
Say the Office of Planning. I know right now they have an active sustainability campaign to try to get donations for plastic bag ban, or something that will help remediate plastic bag waste in the city. That's something for whatever reason governmentally they didn't feel like they had the funds to devote, but they wanted to try to get private donations. If they're asking for funds, it's within the realm of possibility that that could go to a controlled donor. So what the waiver allows them to do is say, all right, we have this waiver now. We can ask for broad donations for this specific program, and even if maybe some of those hit controlled donors, it won't be a problem. So there are a few more exceptions to the acceptance scenario, and this would be where you haven't asked for the gift, but somebody's just offering it to you unsolicited.
Just remember, if somebody doesn't count one of those controlled donors, you can accept a gift from them. Like that's not what the ethics law cares about. It's about gifts that might be coming from these people who have a qualifying relationship with your agency or with the city. But if one of those people is a controlled donor, there are still some exceptions.
So a person or an agency can accept following unsolicited gifts if they wouldn't tend to impair your impartiality or judgment. And for significant gifts, that's over $20.
It doesn't look like it was intended to impair your judgment. The ethics law does allow you to consume food or beverages if it's in the presence of the donor or the sponsor. So that would be sort of some, maybe there's a reception scenario that might be sponsored by someone. If you go, you're allowed to maybe eat the food that's at that event. You can, in this very, very limited scenario, take food from somebody who might otherwise be a controlled donor. But again, remember, it's only if it doesn't raise the appearance of impropriety. So it shouldn't be anything extravagant, it shouldn't be anything fancy, because that would look like it was designed to impair your judgment.
You can also accept the following unsolicited gifts. We already talked about this. Single gift of
$20 or under. And technically, that also means that within the course of a calendar year, you could accept potentially a series of gifts as long as the cumulative value is not over $60. So again, this is a little bit like the previous one of food. Could it still look bad to accept even an insignificant gift? Yeah, absolutely. And might it be best practice or even internal agency policy to not accept any gifts from somebody who might be a vendor or an otherwise controlled donor? Absolutely. And there would be no problems or no appearance problems if that was the policy. But again, under the ethics law, you can technically accept a gift that does not exceed $20 or a series of gifts over the course of a calendar year from that same person that does not exceed $60 in total. Third is the exception for sort of conferences or panels that you might attend. Again, this would only come into play if that conference was sponsored by one of these controlled donors.
If you are a speaker or a panel participant at the event, it's not a general exception for all conference attendees.
And in that scenario, those travel expenses or conference-related expenses are going to exceed $500. You need to notify the ethics board in advance. The expenses that are being sort of gifted can only cover food, travel, lodging, or child or dependent care. I'll also say there's this part about the expenses can include scheduled entertainment. The reason it's called scheduled entertainment is because there were some issues in the past with people going to the spa and they say that it's related to the conference, or going golfing and say it's related to the conference. Those usually aren't counted as scheduled entertainment, and that's not the sort of conference-related expense that you should be accepting under this scenario. Again, when in doubt, If you have the opportunity to take a conference or a trip for a conference, it's probably good to talk about that in advance with ethics board staff. Fourth exception is primarily just for elected officials, and it's when tickets or other free admission events are given to that official to attend a
charitable or cultural or political event, if it's given by that sponsoring organization and it's given as a courtesy to your office.
Tickets to a sporting event don't technically count as a cultural event, and so officials should probably stay away from accepting free sports tickets. Fifth category, and this one's pretty common sense as an exception, even if your spouse or your parent or your children or your siblings happen to be a controlled donor with regard to you or the agency you work for, you can still accept gifts from them.
And finally, the board can determine that certain classes of gifts can be accepted just because it doesn't look like they're going to be detrimental, or raise an appearance. And so far in its regulations, the board has approved pharmaceutical samples that can be given to city health clinics, certain free admissions to educational events and institutions, and then certain free admissions offered by or on behalf of state government. So when state government, might have events or receptions of some kind. Gifts among colleagues, I think, are probably fine. I know there are in some HR policies, I'm not sure what the cities are, subordinates aren't technically allowed to give gifts to supervisors, but that's more in sort of the HR policy side of things. So if those situations come up, we can look at them on a case-by-case basis, and happy to discuss those.